Welcome back. So in our last video we looked at Y arrays and how do we declare them, how do we initialize an array at declaration. In this video we are continuing our journey of arrays by looking at how we can use the values, how we can assign a value to an array, how we can retrieve values from an array. We can use them maybe to display, maybe using them in some calculations, whatever. Okay, so if we have an array declared of size 5 and the name of the array is grades. In other words, if we have a declaration such as this one here, we have made a declaration of array with a name of grades and of size 5, then we can start assigning values. Here the values were initialized, were assigned during declaration, but we are looking at making an assignment after declaration. So this is what is done. We should remember that when an array has been created, that array will have memory spaces allocated for the elements. So if it's 5, then 5 elements, 5 spaces will be allocated, and those 5 spaces have got indices from 1 all the way up to 4. So if we have made this declaration here and we are to assign some values, then we can assign values using the index. We need the name of the array and the position on which we want to assign our value. So the first position 0 is going to be assigned 40, then second one 52 etc, and the last one will be assigned the element number 5, which is 84. So this is how you can assign values to an array. Of course, the values of an array can be assigned directly like this, but in most cases the assignment is done maybe through input statements. We can have maybe a user entering values and we get those values and assign them into an array, or we can have these values coming from the database or from the file. So if we have an array maybe of 10 numbers and we want to assign values, we can ask a user to enter a number. We are going to ask a user 10 times to enter a number using this for loop, and we'll be getting that value and assigning that value to index on to numbers on position 0. So it's the same way how we've been getting values using the normal variables, only that here we need to specify on which position we want our value to be. So on position I for the first iteration here, when I is equal to 0, it will be on position 0. The next time we loop here, then I will be 2, then the value that is entered now will be assigned on position 1. Okay. But now, how do we display these values? We have declared an array, we have assigned the values, maybe we want to display them, or sometimes we may want to use them in some other calculations, as we're going to see later in the maybe demonstrations, how we can actually use the values to do some meaningful calculations. But for now, we just want to see how we can display. So if we have an array, whatever method you have used to get the values of that array, here we are making an assumption that the values have been assigned during declaration. There was an initialization of values, but maybe the values might have been assigned using this method where you are asking a user to enter the values. It's up to you. But what we are saying is, after the values have been assigned, we can access those values by specifying the name of the array and the index. So if we want a value on position 1, the first value of that array, then we are going to have the grades, then 0. This displays the first element, which is 40, and see out grades 3 will display 33, which is on position 3, which is the fourth element, because the 40 is on position 0, and the 52 is on position 1, 67 is on position 2, 33 is on position 3. So it's going to display that one. You can also use a loop, of course, as we did here. For us to get values, we'll use a loop, despite having this method where it will specify index. But in most cases, maybe we may have more, maybe more values. Maybe we want to display 100 numbers. So instead of displaying them line by line, like this, index 0, index 2, index 3, up to index 99 for 100 numbers, we'll just use a loop. So here we are just showing you how we can use a loop to display 5 elements. We have a loop starting from I equals 0 to I less than 5. Then we are displaying every loop. We are displaying one element on index I. And that index I will be changing from 0 to 1 to 2, etc. So the first iteration, we are going to have index 0. So it will be equal to this one. So it will be grades 0. The next time is going to have grades 1, then grades 2, grades 3. It will stop when grade, or I is 4. When it reaches 5, it will be out of the loop. Okay. There's also a two-dimensional array. The arrays we've been working with is one dimension. It's like a vector. We just have a list of values of the same type, which want to manipulate them, process them, to do some operations on them as one unit. But we can have a representation of a matrix. A matrix is a two-dimension. It has got rows and columns. So arrays can also, we can also have arrays to represent a matrix, to represent a table. So here is an example or a graphical representation of our data in a tabular form. So we are showing here that we may have grades for the students. Let's assume our class. Our class has got, this semester, we've got 6 modules. And in our class, we are 60-something students. Each student will have 6 modules. So here we have two-dimensional data. One dimension, we are keeping the number of students. It should represent students, 60-something. And another dimension, we are having now the number of courses each student actually takes. So for this semester, it means on one dimension, we need to indicate that we may need 6. And on another dimension, we need to indicate that this 6 will be for each and every student out of maybe 60-something students. So we can present this data in a table. For example, here we have just shown you 5 grades, but assume we have 6 as is the case for this semester. So the first one here may represent maybe programming. This can be maybe networking. This can be something else, maybe maths. This can be communication. This can be whatever. This can be whatever, maybe economics or electronics for hardware, for those in PIT. And here we have now students 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. up to 60-something. These are your grades. So we can process this as a bunch. For example, at the end of the semester, we can process this. We can have this as an array, and we can process it. For the first student, we may want to know the average. We may want to go through the row of a first student to see if all the grades have passed. Here, as we can see, we have this grade and this grade, which are below the passing mark. So we can process these ones and give appropriate remark to say maybe is referred into or is supposed to have supplementary. or maybe it passed the record, like okay, unfortunately we don't have anyone here who has passed, but this one is also referred in 1, etc. So all these would be done on the same array. So how do we declare a two-dimensional array to keep such information? This is what we do. First, we declare the same way as we did for one-dimensional array, but instead of showing one dimension or one square bracket where we specify the size of the array, now our size of the array is in 2 dimensions. We have the length and width, so to say. We have the number of rows and number of columns. So here we have 3 and 5. So 3 for the rows and 5 for the columns. So in our case, it would be maybe 60 something students, maybe 65 for the rows number of students, and 6 for the number of modules. During declaration, we can also initialize as we did with a one-dimensional array. A two-dimensional array, as we have seen, is a table, but we can also visualize it as an array inside an array. So it's an array in another array. So we have the outer array, then we have other arrays. So here, for example, this might help to understand it much better during this initialization of 2D array. We have student grades, and these student grades, we are having grades for 3 students, and of course each student will have 5. So it's 3 rows of 5 grades. So we have this as outer array, and this outer array is going to have 3 elements. The whole of this one is 1 element or 1 row. This is another element, this is another element. So 3. So the outer array has got 3 elements. So it satisfies this. And the inner array, for each outer element, it has got another array. So the inner element has now another array which is of 5. So each row will have 5 elements. Each row will have 5 elements. In other words, each student will have 5 grades. Each student 5 grades. Each student 5 grades. So this is a representation. It's just a table. It's similar to this information we had here. Okay, so how do we access the values? After we have assigned those values, okay, how do we assign the values? Not accessing yet, but we can use the same approach to access. But if we have declared our two-dimensional array and want to assign values later, then we need to specify the first index and the second index for the first dimension and the second dimension. So we specify both. 0, 0, it means it's an element which is on row number 0, or the first row, and the first column. So we are referring to this one. Then 0, 1 on the same row number 0, but index 1, in other words, column number 1. So it goes all the way up to the end. So this is what we wanted to discuss on the arrays. There are many concepts that we want you to practice, but I'll create another video or 2 more videos just to demonstrate the concepts and try to maybe have other operations demonstrated. For example, we are supposed to have a slide on searching a value in an array. I've skipped that one deliberately. We'll show that one in our practical session or practical videos. So in those videos, I'm going to show you practically how the arrays are declared and how we can process these elements of an array. And also, we are going to show you some applications, some questions that would want you to employ arrays, maybe to process an average, to process any value of that nature, maybe to get a highest or lowest value, etc. Thank you.